The afternoon sun hung low over the quiet streets of Silver Lake, casting long shadows across sidewalks lined with potted plants and parked cars. It was one of those calm Los Angeles days where the air felt still, and the usual city noise faded into a soft hum. A dog trotted along the curb, tail wagging in that easy, unhurried way dogs have when they feel safe. He was a medium-sized mutt, brown with white patches, ears that flopped just right, and eyes that held a kind of quiet trust in the world. His collar had slipped off during a playful dash after a butterfly, but he didn't seem worried. He knew his person wasn't far, not far away. Outside a roadside diner with peeling paint and neon signs that buzzed faintly, a group of motorcyclists had pulled over. They'd rumbled in minutes earlier, engines growling like thunder rolling through the neighborhood. Now they leaned against their bikes, laughing loudly, swapping stories over coffee and fries. Most of them were just passing through, but one man stood out. Not because he was louder, but because of the way he carried himself, shoulders tense, eyes scanning like he was always looking for something to prove. He'd been riding alone for a while, and lately his jokes had taken a sharper edge. The dog, curious and friendly as ever, wandered closer. He wasn't begging, just pausing near the edge of the parking lot, sniffing the air. Maybe it was the smell of fries, or maybe he just liked people. Either way, he posed no threat. He sat down a few feet away, tongue out, tail giving a slow, hopeful thump against the pavement. That's when it happened. Without warning, the man kicked him. Not a nudge, not a shove to shoo him away. A hard, deliberate strike aimed at the dog's side. The kind of kick someone might deliver to a trash can they were mad at, not a living creature. The dog yelped, a sharp, broken sound that cut through the laughter like glass. He scrambled backward, limping, eyes wide with confusion more than fear. The man laughed, turning to his friends like it was the punchline to a joke no one else understood. A couple of them chuckled nervously. One looked away. Inside the diner, a young woman wiping down tables froze. She'd seen it all through the window. Her stomach dropped. She fumbled for her phone, turned on the camera, and caught the tail end. The dog limping into the alley between the diner and the laundromat. The man high-fiving someone like he'd just scored a point in a game no one else was playing. A few blocks away, the dog's owner sat at a small outdoor cafe, stirring sugar into his black coffee. He wasn't in a rush. He rarely was. People often did double takes when they recognized him. Some stared, some smiled shyly, some pretended not to notice. But he'd long since grown used to moving through the world quietly. Fame hadn't changed his habits much. He still walked his dog every morning and evening, still bought his own groceries, still said please and thank you like it mattered. Right now, he was just thinking about the book he was reading, about whether to get a refill, about how the sky was turning that soft gold color he liked. Then his phone buzzed. It was a neighbor, a woman who lived 2 doors down and often watered his plants when he traveled. Her voice was tight, urgent. He's okay, but... Your dog, someone hurt him. Near Lou's diner. He ran off limping. I saw it happen. The coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. For a second, he didn't move. Then he was up, tossing a few bills on the table, already walking fast. His heart wasn't racing. It was heavy like a stone sinking in water. He knew that dog better than anyone. Knew how he slept curled against the bed. How he'd tilt his head when you asked him a question. How he'd nudge your hand if you'd been quiet too long. Hurting him wasn't just cruelty. It was like kicking something fragile and good in a world that didn't have enough of it. He reached the diner in under 5 minutes. The motorcyclists were gone. Only tire marks and the smell of exhaust left behind. A few people lingered outside, talking in low voices. The diner employee who'd filmed it stepped forward, eyes red. "I'm so sorry," she said, holding out her phone. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just..." "It's okay," he said gently. "Thank you for calling." He didn't watch the video right then. He followed the direction she pointed, the narrow alley between buildings. Trash bins, cracked pavement, the hum of a distant air conditioner. And there, huddled behind a stack of cardboard boxes, was his dog. He was trembling. One front paw lifted off the ground, but when he saw his person, his tail gave a weak wag. Not because he wasn't hurt, but because he was relieved. The man knelt slow and calm. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, voice softer than usual. He didn't pick him up right away. Just let his hands rest on the dog's back, feeling the rapid rise and fall of his ribs. "You're okay. I've got you." The dog leaned into him. pressing his head against his knee like he was trying to disappear into safety. A few minutes later, they were in the car, heading to the nearest animal hospital. The drive was quiet except for the dog's shallow breathing. At the clinic, the vet examined him carefully, bruising along the ribs, a possible sprain in the front leg, but no broken bones. "He's lucky," the vet said. "It could have been much worse." Lucky. The word sat wrong in his chest. Back home, after the dog was settled on his favorite blanket with pain meds and a bowl of water, the man finally watched the video. He didn't react outwardly, no shouting, no slamming things. But his jaw tightened and his eyes stayed fixed on the screen long after it ended. He saw the casual cruelty, the laughter, the way no one stepped in. And he saw his dog the way he'd looked up, trusting, right before the boot connected. He sat on the floor beside the blanket for a long time, one hand resting on the dog's side, feeling the warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the neighborhood carried on, cars passing, kids laughing down the street, the distant wail of a siren. Normal life. But something had shifted. He didn't call the press, didn't post anything online. Instead, he made 2 calls, one to the local animal welfare officer and another to a friend who knew how to navigate these things without turning it into a circus. "I want this handled properly," he said. Not loudly, just properly. As night fell, he stayed on the floor watching the dog sleep. Every so often, the dog would whimper softly in his dreams and the man would whisper something quiet, words meant only for him. There was anger there, yes, but deeper than that was a quiet resolve. Not for revenge, not for headlines, but for the simple truth that kindness shouldn't be punished, and cruelty shouldn't go unanswered. And in that stillness, with the dog finally breathing easy again, he made a promise, not out loud but in the way that matters most. This wouldn't be forgotten. Not by him, not by the dog, and soon enough not by the man who thought it was funny. The next morning came in soft and gray, the kind of overcast that muffles sound and slows time. Inside the small house tucked between 2 old oaks, the dog lay on his blanket, still favoring his front leg but more alert than the night before. His tail thumped once when his person walked into the room. Just a light tap against the floor, but it meant everything. He'd eaten a little, drunk water on his own, and even tried to stand a couple of times, though he wobbled. Progress, however small, felt like a gift. His person didn't rush him. He sat cross-legged on the floor, gently brushing the dog's fur with his fingers, checking for new signs of pain. "Take your time," he murmured, as if the dog could understand every word. Maybe he could. Animals sense more than people give them credit for, especially the ones who've known kindness. By mid-morning, the animal welfare officer arrived. She was in her 50s with tired eyes and a calm voice, the kind of person who'd seen too much cruelty but still showed up every day. She listened without interrupting as he described what happened, then watched the diner employee's video on her tablet. Her expression didn't change much, but her fingers tightened slightly around the device. "This is actionable," she said. "We'll need the original file and a statement from the witness. And from you," he nodded. "Whatever it takes." She paused, then added quietly, "People usually want this to go away. Especially, well, you know." She didn't say his name. Didn't need to. "But you're doing the opposite." "I'm not doing it for me," he said simply. "I'm doing it for him." Later that day, the diner employee came by. She was nervous, twisting her hands together, eyes darting around like she expected cameras to pop out of the bushes. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she started. "You didn't?" he said gently. "You did the right thing. The hardest part is often just seeing something and not looking away." She relaxed a little then, and handed over the original video file on a small USB drive. "I've been getting messages," she admitted. "Some people are saying I should have stopped it. Others say I'm making a big deal out of nothing." "It's never nothing," he told her. "Not when it's someone who can't speak for themselves." That afternoon, he walked to the local police station, not in a car, not with an entourage, just him in a worn jacket and jeans, hands in his pockets. A few people recognized him on the street, but they gave him space. Word had started to spread, not through headlines, but through whispers. That happened near Lou's. "The dog belongs to you know who." Someone filmed it. Social media had picked it up too. A short clip, just the kick and the yelp, was circulating on a few local community pages. Comments ranged from outrage to disbelief. "Who does that to a dog?" one read. "Hope they find the guy," said another. No one knew yet who the owner was. But the dog's face, gentle, confused, hurt, was already becoming a quiet symbol. At the station, he spoke with a detective who'd handled animal cases before. The man was no nonsense but respectful. He took the USB, logged it as evidence, and asked for a written statement. While he filled out the form at a small desk in the corner, the detective watched him. "Most folks in your position would have sent a lawyer," he said finally. "Maybe," he replied without looking up. "But this isn't about position. It's about what's right." Back home, he found a message from a local news outlet asking for comment. He didn't respond. Instead, he called a friend who worked with a non-profit that supported animal protection laws. "What's the best way to make sure this leads to real change?" he asked. They talked for nearly an hour, about legal procedures, about how misdemeanor animal cruelty charges often get dismissed or reduced, about how hard it is to get courts to take these cases seriously, unless there's public pressure or undeniable evidence. "But you've got both," his friend said. "The video is clear. And if people find out it's your dog, well, that'll bring attention, whether you want it or not," he sighed. "I don't want attention. I want accountability." That night he sat on the back porch with the dog beside him, wrapped in a light blanket. The sky was clearing, stars starting to blink through. The dog rested his head on his knee, eyes half closed, breathing slow and steady. He scratched behind his ears the way he liked. "You're safe now," he whispered. "No one's going to hurt you again." But even as he said it, he knew safety wasn't just about keeping the dog close. It was about making sure the person who did this couldn't do it to another animal. That meant stepping into the light, even if he hated it. The next morning, a neighbor knocked on the door. She'd seen the video online and recognized the dog. "Is he okay?" she asked, eyes full of worry. "He's getting there," he said. She hesitated, then said, "People are talking. Some are saying it was that guy from the Iron Ridge crew, the one with the skull patch. He's been causing trouble for months. Threw a soda can at a cat last winter. Got into a fight at a gas station over a parking spot." He listened carefully. Names didn't matter yet, but patterns did. If this wasn't a one-time thing, that changed everything. By lunchtime, the police had confirmed it. Using the bike's license plate from the video's background and cross-referencing with traffic cams, they'd identified the group and the man who kicked the dog. He lived about 20 miles away, worked odd jobs, had a record for disorderly conduct, but nothing involving animals. Yet. The detective called. "We've got him. We'll bring him in for questioning tomorrow." He thanked the detective, then sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at his coffee. He thought about what to do next. Part of him wanted to stay silent, let the system do its work. But another part, the part that had held his trembling dog the night before, knew silence sometimes lets cruelty hide. So he made a decision. He didn't go on TV, didn't post on social media. But he did agree to speak with one reporter, a local journalist known for thoughtful, fact-based stories, not sensationalism. "Only if you focus on the issue, not me," he said. "And only if you include resources for reporting animal abuse." The journalist agreed. That evening, as the dog slept soundly for the first time since the incident, his person sat at his desk and wrote a short statement. Not angry, not dramatic, just clear. What happened to my dog wasn't just an act of violence against an animal. It was a failure of basic decency. If you see something like this, don't look away, speak up. Animals count too. He didn't sign it with flair, just his name. And then he turned off the lamp, walked back to the living room, and lay down on the floor beside the blanket. The dog opened one eye, then rested his paw gently on his arm. Outside, the neighborhood slept, but something had begun to shift, quietly, steadily, like roots growing under the surface. And in that stillness, justice wasn't about punishment. It was about making sure kindness had a chance to grow again. The story broke on a Thursday morning, not with a bang, but with a quiet ripple that spread faster than anyone expected. The local news site published the article just after sunrise, short, factual, anchored by the video and a single quote from the dog's owner. No dramatic headlines, no blurry paparazzi shots, just the truth laid out plainly. A dog had been kicked for no reason. The owner had come forward not for fame, but for justice, and the police were investigating. By noon, it was everywhere. Neighbors who'd only ever waved from their driveways now stopped each other on the sidewalk to talk about it. Baristas at the corner cafe lowered their voices when recounting what they'd seen outside Lou's diner. Online, the comments section filled, not with conspiracy theories or cruel jokes, but with stories of people's own dogs, their own fears, their own moments of helplessness when they'd witnessed something wrong and hadn't known what to do. One woman wrote about calling animal control after seeing a chained dog left in the rain for days. Another shared how he'd adopted a senior dog from a shelter after seeing a similar video years ago. The thread became less about outrage and more about connection, a shared understanding that animals trust us, and that trust is sacred. Meanwhile, the man who'd kicked the dog was starting to feel the walls close in. He'd woken up to a barrage of texts from people he barely knew. "Dude, did that really you? People are saying it's your bike in the video. You messed with the wrong dog." At first, he laughed it off, posted a meme on his social account with a caption like "haters gonna hate," but then his phone started ringing. His usual riding buddies stopped answering. The local motorcycle shop where he sometimes fixed bikes quietly told him they were booked solid for the next month, permanently. Even the gas station clerk who usually gave him free coffee looked away when he walked in. He hadn't expected this. In his mind, it had been a dumb joke, a moment of stupid bravado to impress guys who barely remembered his name. He didn't think anyone would care, certainly not enough to track him down. And he definitely didn't know whose dog it was, but now rumors were swirling. Not wild guesses, but careful whispers. That's not just any dog. That's his dog. And once that clicked, everything changed. People who'd once shrugged at his loud behavior now saw him differently. Not as a rough-around-the-edges rider, but as someone who'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. His motorcycle club held an emergency meeting. Not official, just a few longtime members at a back booth in a diner far from Silver Lake. They didn't yell. They didn't throw him out. But the message was clear. We don't stand for that. If you're charged, you're on your own. One older member, a man with grease-stained hands and a soft voice, said quietly, "Animals don't have a voice. You don't get to be the reason they suffer." The man left the meeting feeling smaller than he had in years. Back in Silver Lake, life continued, but with a new kind of watchfulness. Neighbors kept an eye out during walks. Kids who used to run past now stopped to pet the dog gently, asking, "Is he feeling better?" A woman who ran a small pet-sitting business started a neighborhood group chat called Paws Watch, a place to share sightings of loose dogs, report suspicious behavior, or just check in. It wasn't vigilante justice. It was community care, sparked by one act of cruelty and one person's quiet refusal to let it slide. The dog's owner noticed the shift. He still walked his dog in the evenings, but now people nodded at him with a kind of quiet respect. Not because of who he was, but because of what he'd done. He hadn't shouted, hadn't demanded headlines. He'd simply said, "This was wrong," and stood by it. One afternoon, while waiting at the vet for a follow-up check, he overheard two staff members talking. "It's crazy," one said. "We've had 3 more calls this week about animal abuse. People actually reporting things they saw. Last month we got maybe 1. He didn't say anything, just smiled faintly and scratched his dog behind the ears. The police, meanwhile, were moving carefully but steadily. They'd interviewed the diner employee, reviewed traffic footage, and confirmed the suspect's identity beyond doubt. They brought him in for questioning. He denied it at first, claimed the dog lunged at him, that he was just defending himself. But the video showed otherwise. No growling, no barking, just a dog sitting peacefully, then a boot out of nowhere. When the detective played the clip in the interview room, the man went silent. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he muttered. "It is," the detective replied, "especially when the dog belongs to someone who actually shows up." By the end of the week, formal charges were filed, misdemeanor animal cruelty, with a request for enhanced penalties due to the video evidence and lack of provocation. The district attorney's office, sensing both public interest and a clear-cut case, agreed to pursue it fully. News of the charges spread just as quickly as the original story. This time, though, the tone shifted again. Not just anger, but hope. People began sharing links to local animal shelters, donation pages, volunteer opportunities. A high school art class even made posters with messages like, Be Their Voice and Kindness Has No Collar, which they hung around the neighborhood. The dog, for his part, seemed to sense the change too. His limp was almost gone. He greeted mornings with eager stretches and tail wags. He even barked softly at a squirrel again, something he hadn't done since the incident. His person watched him with quiet relief. Healing wasn't just physical. It was the return of trust, the belief that the world could still be safe. One evening, as they walked past Lou's diner, the dog paused. He looked toward the alley but didn't flinch, just sniffed the air, then turned to his person with calm eyes as if to say, "I'm okay now." They kept walking. Back home, the owner sat on the porch again, this time with a cup of tea instead of coffee. The dog lay at his feet, head resting on his shoe. The street was quiet. No cameras, no crowds. Just the hum of the city and the steady rhythm of a life returning to peace. But something important had already happened. One act of cruelty had met one act of courage, and in between, a whole community had woken up. Not with fury, but with care. Not with noise, but with action. And that, more than anything, was the real story. The courthouse wasn't grand. Just a low brick building tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore. The kind of place most people passed without a second glance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. It was a Tuesday morning, and the courtroom assigned to the case was nearly full. Not with reporters or gawkers, but with locals, dog walkers, shelter volunteers, neighbors who'd seen the video and felt something shift in their chest when they watched it. The man who'd kicked the dog sat at the defendant's table, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. He wore a clean shirt, not his usual leather vest, and kept twisting a paper cup in his hands. He hadn't shaved, and dark circles hung under his eyes. He looked less like someone defiant and more like someone who'd finally understood the weight of what he'd done. Across the room, the dog's owner sat quietly in the third row, wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans. He didn't look around, didn't pose for anyone. His dog wasn't with him, left safely at home with a trusted friend, but his presence felt like an unspoken anchor in the room. A few people nodded when he entered, not out of celebrity, but out of shared understanding. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a no-nonsense voice, called the case. The prosecutor laid out the facts clearly. Video evidence, witness testimony, veterinary records confirming injury consistent with blunt force trauma. No exaggeration, no drama. Just the truth, piece by piece. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The judge turned to the dog's owner. "You've requested to speak before sentencing. Is that correct?" He stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just rose from his seat, walked to the front, and faced the bench. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of quiet that makes people lean in to listen. "Your Honor," he began, "I'm not here to ask for punishment. I'm here because my dog didn't do anything wrong. He was just being himself, friendly, trusting, curious, and someone hurt him for no reason." He paused, glancing briefly at the man in the defendant's chair, not with anger, but with something closer to sadness. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I want from this," he continued, "and it's not revenge. It's understanding. This man needs to see what he did, not just as a rule he broke, but as a living being he hurt. Animals don't hold grudges. They don't plot. They just give love even when they've been let down." He took a breath. "So I'm asking that instead of just a fine or jail time, which won't change anything, he be required to spend time at an animal shelter, not as a punishment, but as a chance to see what care looks like. To learn that animals feel fear, pain, joy, just like we do. Maybe then he'll think twice before acting like cruelty is entertainment." The courtroom was silent. Even the bailiff stopped shuffling papers. The judge studied him for a long moment, then turned to the defendant. "Do you have anything to say?" The man stood slowly. His voice cracked at first. I didn't think it mattered," he said, eyes still down. "I thought it was just a dog. I didn't know. I didn't know he had someone who loved him like that." He swallowed hard. "I've been sleeping in my truck since this happened. People won't talk to me. My own brother told me I made him ashamed. And I get it now. I really do." He looked up finally, not at the judge, but at the dog's owner. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix it, but I mean it." The judge nodded slowly. She'd seen plenty of empty apologies in her years on the bench. This one didn't sound empty. After a short recess, she returned with her decision. She sentenced the man to 120 hours of community service, specifically at a no-kill animal shelter approved by the court. He'd also be placed on 1 year of probation, banned from owning or living with any animals during that time, and required to attend a counseling program focused on empathy and impulse control. The fine was modest, but the real weight was in the service. No shortcuts, the judge said firmly. You'll be supervised. And if you don't complete every hour, with a positive evaluation from the shelter staff, you'll be back here facing steeper consequences. Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters waited, but the dog's owner didn't stop. He walked past them without a word, hands in his pockets, head down just enough to avoid eye contact. One journalist called out, "Any comment on the sentence?" He paused, turned slightly, and said only, "It's a start," before continuing down the steps. Back in the neighborhood, word spread fast. People weren't celebrating. There was no sense of triumph. Instead, there was a quiet relief, a feeling that something broken had been handled with care, not just force. At the local coffee shop, two women discussed the outcome over oat milk lattes. "I'm glad he has to actually be around animals," one said. "Maybe it'll change him." Her friend nodded. "Or at least make him think before he acts like that again." That afternoon, the dog's owner returned home to find his dog waiting by the door, tail wagging in wide, happy arcs. He dropped to his knees and hugged him gently, burying his face in the dog's fur for a long moment. No words, just presence. The dog licked his ear, then trotted off to his water bowl like nothing had ever been wrong. Later, the owner sat on the back porch again, this time with a book he hadn't opened in days. The sun was warm, the air still. He thought about the man in the courtroom, the shame in his voice, the way his hands shook. It would have been easy to want him punished harshly, but punishment doesn't always teach. Sometimes it just breeds more anger. What he'd asked for wasn't soft. It was harder. It required the man to face what he'd done, day after day, in the eyes of creatures who couldn't speak but whose trust had to be earned. That kind of reckoning sticks. A few days later, he got a call from the shelter director. "He showed up this morning," she said. "Nervous as anything. Didn't say much, but he cleaned kennels without complaining. And when a scared terrier wouldn't come out of the corner, he just sat on the floor and waited. Didn't reach. Didn't rush. Just waited until the dog came to him. That's something," he replied. "It is," she agreed. "It's a start." And in that simple phrase there was hope. Not the flashy kind, but the real kind. The kind that grows slowly, quietly, in the space between regret and repair. That night, as he lay in bed with the dog curled at his feet, he felt a strange peace. Not because justice had been served perfectly, nothing ever is, but because something human had happened in a system that often forgets humanity. Someone had been held accountable. Someone else had chosen compassion over rage, and somewhere a scared dog had taken a step toward trust again. In a world that often feels loud and broken, that was enough. Weeks passed, and the sharp edges of the incident began to soften, not because it was forgotten, but because something new had grown in its place. The dog moved through the house with his old ease again, bounding after toys, napping in sunbeams, greeting every walk like it was an adventure. His limp was gone, and so was the flinch in his eyes whenever a loud noise startled him. Healing, it turned out, wasn't just about time. It was about safety, consistency, and the quiet certainty that someone would always be there. His person noticed the change in small ways. The way the dog would press his nose into his hand during thunderstorms now, not trembling, just seeking closeness. The way he'd sit patiently by the door when it was time for a walk. Tail thumping not out of excitement alone, but out of trust. That trust had been shaken, but it hadn't broken. And that meant everything. Life in the neighborhood had shifted too. What started as a single act of cruelty had sparked something unexpected. A sense of shared responsibility. The Pause Watch group chat was still active, but now it wasn't just about reporting problems, it was about organizing. A few residents had started a weekend program where volunteers walked dogs for elderly neighbors, or people recovering from surgery. Another group collected gently used leashes, bowls, and blankets to donate to the local shelter. Even the diner where it all began had put up a small sign near the entrance. "All animals welcome. Please be kind." One Saturday morning, the dog's owner took him to the park. Not the busy one downtown, but the quieter green space near the library, where trees arched over winding paths and benches sat in patches of dappled light. As they walked, a woman with two young kids approached. She didn't ask for a photo or an autograph. She just smiled and said, "He looks great." "He is," he replied, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Thanks for checking in." Her youngest child, no older than 5, crouched slowly and held out a hand. The dog sniffed it, then gave a gentle lick. The boy giggled. "He's soft." "He is," the man said. "And he's got a big heart." That simple exchange, no cameras, no fanfare, felt more meaningful than any headline. Meanwhile, the man who'd kicked the dog was still showing up at the shelter. At first, he'd kept to himself, doing his hours in silence, eyes down. But over time, something changed. He started asking questions. How to tell if a cat was stressed, why some dogs flinched at sudden movements, how to earn the trust of an animal who'd been hurt before. The shelter staff noticed. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. He was learning. One afternoon, he was assigned to help with a senior beagle named Daisy, surrendered when her owner moved into assisted living. Daisy was shy, slow to warm up, and walked with a slight hitch in her back leg. The man sat with her for nearly an hour, just talking softly, offering treats, letting her come to him. When she finally rested her head on his knee, he didn't move. Just stayed still, like he was holding something precious. The shelter director watched from the doorway. Later, she told the dog's owner about it during a phone call. "I think he gets it now," she said. "Not just that what he did was wrong, but why it mattered." "That's all anyone can ask for," he replied. He didn't seek updates. Didn't need to. He'd made his point in court, and now he trusted the process. Some wounds heal in silence. Some lessons take root only when the soil is ready. Back home, the seasons turned. Summer faded into fall, and the evenings grew cooler. The dog loved the crisp air, trotting ahead on walks with his nose to the ground, sniffing fallen leaves and chasing the occasional squirrel with renewed joy. His person watched him with a quiet smile, the kind that comes from seeing something you love return to itself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples, they ended up at their favorite bench, the one near the old oak tree at the edge of the park. The dog hopped up beside him, rested his head on his knee, and let out a long, contented sigh. No words were needed, just the two of them, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of the city winding down. In that moment, there was no fame, no courtroom, no video. Just a man and his dog, safe and together. What happened that day outside the diner hadn't been erased. But it hadn't defined them either. Instead, it had become a turning point. Not just for them, but for others. The local animal shelter reported a 40% increase in volunteer applications since the case made the news. Schools in the area started inviting humane educators to talk to students about empathy and animal care. Even the motorcycle club that once shrugged off rough behavior issued a new code of conduct, including a line about respecting all living things. Change didn't come in a single grand gesture. It came in small, steady acts, people choosing kindness over indifference, speaking up instead of looking away, giving someone a second chance not because they deserved it, but because growth is possible when we create space for it. The dog's owner never gave interviews about it again. He didn't need to. The story lived on in quieter ways, in the way neighbors greeted each other's pets by name, in the extra bowl of water left out on hot days for passing strays, in the teenager who filmed a man yelling at a stray cat and called animal control instead of walking past. And sometimes, on his evening walks, he'd pass the shelter. He never went inside, didn't want to make it about him. But once, through the window, he saw the man who'd kicked his dog kneeling beside a nervous terrier, hand outstretched, voice low and patient. The dog in the shelter tentatively licked his fingers. The man didn't flinch, just smiled, a small, uncertain thing, but real. That was enough. As night settled over the neighborhood, the dog yawned and stretched, then stood and nudged his person's hand with his nose. Time to go home. They walked slowly back, past porch lights flickering on, past the sound of laughter from open windows, past a world that wasn't perfect, but was trying. And in the quiet rhythm of their steps, steady, side by side, there was a kind of peace that no headline could capture, no video could show. It was the peace of knowing that even in a world where cruelty sometimes wins the moment, kindness can still win the day. Not with noise, not with punishment, but with presence, patience, and the simple, stubborn belief that everyone and every dog deserves a chance to be better.